them.
Good afternoon and welcome to our 1 hour in-depth talk at IBC. Today we're going to talk to Gary Pritchard, Dean of the School of Media at Ravensbourne University, about the importance of good education in broadcasting. We're also introducing Erin Stowers, who's the Strategic Product Manager for Playout Studios and Systems Integration at Red Bee Media, who will be coming to talk to us all about Playout. And you can follow us live on mediapark.nl/IBC and of course listen to us live on New Business Radio. So Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a bit about Ravensbourne University, what your challenges are?
Yeah, I think Ravensbourne in some ways represents, just walking around the conference here, everything that kind of touches the kind of broadcast challenge. So in our case, we're trying to produce the next generation of talent for this industry. And I guess from your point of view, it's actually where does that pipeline come from? And so I guess part of my job is to join those two elements.
Yeah, I mean, we're really seeing quite a challenge in terms of getting new blood into broadcasting and engineering and finding that it's hard to find graduates with the right skills.
Yeah, absolutely right. And in fact, it's even worse than that in some ways because the courses that we run, which include, for example, broadcast technology and engineering, but also right through to kind of content development. Sometimes getting people to actually teach on those courses is tricky because, as you rightly say, that kind of generation that are transitioning the kind of digital revolution are kind of going into retirement. And actually, those jobs are not necessarily seen as sexy by people applying to university. And one of our jobs is to try and persuade them. And actually, we talked about this, I remember a few weeks ago, where how do you kind of brand something? How do you, wave a flag that says, actually, even though if you say, for example, a course called broadcast media just sounds incredibly dull. So our challenge is how do we sex that up somewhat?
Do you think it's changed over the years where, maybe 5 years ago students thought broadcast engineering was sexy and now it's moved on? Do you see a change in expectations?
No, possibly. I think that traditional students who had an engineering, if you like, orientation could see career trajectories, if you like. But I think that's all blown apart now. And I think that when you speak to scientists who've looked at this coming through generation and they talk to them about their ambitions, the last research I read said something like the top 60% responses was, I want to be famous. So with that orientation, how do you pitch to that generation, if you like?
You are actually famous now because you're on this Media Park Live Radio.
I've arrived, of course, but we're just talking about the generation coming through. So yeah, so it's a real challenge. I think it's not just about branding. It is actually, if we're honest, I've been walking around this conference this morning, and perhaps the one thing I pick up more than anything is individuals and organizations trying to predict the future. And some of them do it with great confidence, but if we're really honest, none of us really know where this is going. And so that's a kind of double challenge for us. How do we get students to come through, to get excited about kind of potential futures and careers? They're going into debt, for example. So, we take that deadly seriously at Ravensbourne. But at the same time, how do you prepare them for careers that don't even exist yet? And so I think from our point of view and where we think we offer something that is unique is we're trying to pitch ourselves in that segue between technology and creativity. And it's that kind of hybrid that is most exciting for us.
What about diversity? Do you see increased diversity in the students that come to Ravensbourne?
Yeah, that's we're picking up on all the real big hitting themes here in higher education, and diversity is massive. We're really blessed at Ravensbourne in that 40% of our students would identify themselves as Black ethnic minority. So that already, immediately, we have an audience, if you like, just hungry to tune into these debates. But also, the rest of our cohorts tend to be non-traditional. And so that comes with great excitement because when they look at new media, so-called, they have different ways of seeing than we traditionally would have seen. But it also comes with challenges because if you're a first-generation student coming from, perhaps your parents never went to university, your brand style of learning has to be customized, if you like, to reflect that. In other words, lecture theatres full of 300 students, those days have gone. You wouldn't believe it if you actually went around universities in the UK, but we realised actually that's just dead. So if you came to our campus, for example, it's very open plan. the whole architecture of the place is designed to blur the boundaries between disciplines, so that if you're a graphic designer, for example, you'll be rubbing shoulders with a motion graphics person, with an animator, with a games designer, with a TV broadcaster. And that's deliberate in order to nurture, if you like, a pedagogy, a way of learning that really can equip those students for when they leave for the world of work.
Where do you see most of your students moving on to after they've graduated?
Yeah, so we've always had a great reputation. In fact, Red Bee, apparently, just today you've been telling me about how many graduates have kind of moved on, placed within your organisation. And so we've always had a great reputation with the kind of big broadcast companies and everything from the BBC right through to the kind of smaller production companies. So that's been our history. It's our DNA, if you like. I think the bigger challenge now is, when I stand in front of a bunch of students on an open day, for example, trying to persuade them to come to us, 10 years ago, it was mostly students with one or two parents. Now it's probably more parents than young people. Mm-hmm. So not only am I talking to those students, I'm talking to their parents. And of course, they have their own, anxieties about, why should I send my son or daughter to your institution?
Because they're the ones funding most of the education.
Yeah. We used to joke about Americans. We used to call them helicopter parents and actually laugh at that. As if, we're so more sophisticated than that. But it's kind of, what do they say? When America sneezes, we catch a cold. And we now have our own helicopter parents. For sure.
Is there a lot of competition in your area for different types of courses?
Yeah, there is. And I think the competition is both political and it's also practical. So the political side is the government are really, if you like, encouraging students to see themselves as customers. And that's a real challenge for us because I don't see them as customers. We have to provide them an incredible service and an environment where they can flourish and nurture their talent and their gifts, if you like. But they're not buying a product. So we do have students now for the first time in the last few years coming in and saying, well, why aren't I getting this? I'm paying my £9,000 or whatever it is. Why aren't I getting this piece of kit or that piece of kit? And so we have a really a very strong identity in Ravensbourne where we say the technology, what you're paying for is the right, if you like, to study with us. And right at the heart of that, in the first instance, from my point of view as a dean of a media school, is that first discussion is about what are you bringing to the table. It's not about how are we going to train you for a career. What do you bring to the table in the first instance? In fact, are you a social learner? Are you somebody who just likes to take technology, disappear into a corner and work it out? Okay, well, we can support that. But actually, that's not right for everybody. I was just saying to you before we went on air that the way I learn is very social. If I'm in a mix of two or three people and we can kind of, ideate, then I'm energized, I'm excited about that, and I'm going to be engaged.
And collaboration skills are so important in this industry in order just to make something new and exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, collaboration, we've just about to launch our new curriculum at Ravensbourne. It's called the Mindsets and Skill Sets Manifesto. And we spent a lot of time giving it that name because it's not just about the skill sets. It's not just about actually training them on kit or the craft, if you like, of this industry. It is about the mindsets as well. So, for example, you mentioned collaboration. My students hate collaboration. When I tell them they got a group project coming up in 4 weeks' time, they want to run for the hills. And we explain to them that most people hate collaboration. I actually want everybody to be like me. I actually want everybody to have my taste, to have the same taste in music. But guess what? The world is different for me. And I think, working with students to understand that. But also you can teach that and train that. How to give and receive good criticism. That's a skill you can learn.
But it takes confidence, empathy and trust to be able to share ideas because, of course, you're worried about the other person rubbishing them. But that's actually part and parcel of being successful in media is all about. There's always an audience, there's always a critic. But actually, the majority of the time, it's about the interaction between more than one person, which generates something special and magic. So when a graduate leaves Ravensbourne, what do you hope for them in terms of their aspirations? What do you hope when they leave they will bring for themselves and for the companies they work for?
Yeah, so I think my colleague, the Dean of Design, Professor Lawrence Egan, has a nice phrase. He says, we need to produce graduates who are willing to both rock the boats and row the boats. And so we don't expect everybody who's going to leave Ravensbourne are going to be captains of industry into where they're heading. But some will be, and the way that you become the advanced guard, if you like, in terms of your sector, is you have to have an education that allows you to make mistakes, and allows you to experiment, allows you to, as you rightly say, be vulnerable, to stick your neck out. And so we build that right into the heart of the curriculum, so you don't feel a failure. There's a really interesting educational psychologist called Carol Dweck, and she wrote a wonderful book called Mindsets, if you're interested in this stuff. And she talks about two types of people generally. They tend to be either people with a fixed mindset or with a growth mindset. And the thing with a fixed mindset is you may be a straight A student. You come into a higher education on one of our courses, say, and you might be then faced with a challenge you've never been faced before, where you could look silly if you actually answer incorrectly. And that fixed mindset student who's gone through the kind of rote learning education we all went through, which is just memory-based effectively, suddenly they go from kind of the great A, the straight A students who are thriving, suddenly they close down their learning because they're terrified of failure. So that journey from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is absolutely critical.
And I know from a company perspective, within Red Bee Media, a growth mindset is so important because, of course, technology is changing so quickly. So whatever you learn in your first year will have changed and be completely different to years 3 and 4. So we need to encourage people throughout the system, from education into their careers, that learning is continuous, that you have to spend at least 20% when you're in your career actually learning something new.
Absolutely. I would also argue that once you do that, it's not just a benefit to the company, but actually it benefits the rest of your life. So again, going back to Carol Dweck, she would say, for example, somebody with a fixed mindset is very threatened by somebody else's success. So that moment when you're with your mates and somebody says, I've got some great news, I've got this new job and I'm going to relocate, and there's that real buzz of excitement. The fixed mindset person in that group, because they'll nod along and smile and pat their back, but actually they're very threatened by that. If you have a growth mindset, actually you're fascinated by the fact that one of your friends has just succeeded, and actually you want to tune into that and actually know what were the factors that actually caused you to flourish in that way. So it really doesn't just impact internal business culture, it impacts how an individual views their life and their futures.
So first day of IBC this year. It's been a really busy day already. What's your kind of take home from the show so far? What have you seen that you've really that you want to take home and tell your students about?
So I think I came last year for the first year and actually was completely overwhelmed, I'll be totally honest. I actually came with some students, so they were filming, getting a sense of the event for themselves. This year, it's been helpful. I've wandered around, chat with you, and it's great to have those demos from your colleagues. And, I was joking with somebody just before this, saying that I kind of nod along and pretend I understand what most of you are saying. The reality is at least 50% is going on in my head. But it is exciting, and I think even in the 1 year from coming last year to this, I'm seeing a huge shift in terms of that technological advance, that revolution that we constantly refer to. When you come here, it's kind of like that on acid, it's off the charts. Yeah. And even like the green screen technology, for example, which I remember walking around seeing that last year, that's just taken on a huge leap again. It just seems so quick, cheaper, and more impressive now. So that's just one example of something that I've seen that has just blown me away. And I think our challenge in higher education is that how on earth do you prepare students to we attempt to do all we can to put that technology in the hands of students while they're undergraduates. And the way we do that actually is to work with companies like yours. So, for example, we had a group called Double Me come to us, a South Korean company. They had this kind of 3D real-time capture technology. And they said, we just like to put this in the hands of your students to see what they would do with it. We have no idea. And actually, so it's a great mutual relationship. They get kind of content and feedback and data from their technology, and our students get to handle stuff they never would unless they were in your industry.
And would you be able to bring students back, I think in next IBC 2019, do you think that becomes an important part of the academic year? Is that something that you could see?
Well, I'm not sure it's particularly educational friendly, actually. I think that what this would really benefit from is a more educational strand. It'd be interesting to know, I don't know this for sure, but how many educators a year? And I think that actually that's perhaps part of the missing puzzle. And so maybe if you have any influence, if I have any influence, maybe we should encourage a strand, that is educational.
Well, I'm hoping that next year, as Redby and Ravensbourne get closer and closer together, there'll be something definitely to share on that side. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Me too, it's been fun.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Good luck.